It's been a long time coming, SkittenSlovakia. Finally, part 5. A year and a half late. We started this in the start of 2023, I think.
I think so.
I think it's been a year. The history of beer. The rise of beer barons. The final part.
What up, Hope Biscuits? It's your girl Skitten back at it again. Got my husband here for part 5. We finally freaking made it. I had to drag him. Kicking and screaming.
I said this was my idea.
Seize him.
No.
By the root of his hair and the nape of his neck.
No.
Like a little
You saw the intro.
Kitten.
I'm the one who brought this up. This was my idea. This was my plan. We're here now, and that's the focus. And I took initiative. You saw it here first. So, extra history, final part. Super excited. I totally remember what happened the last time.
Do you?
All I really took away, my main takeaways after a year from this video that I think about all the time, actually, not a joke, is beer was lumpy.
No, not lumpy, it was thick.
Lumpy. It was in pots at one point. And like the beer I thought was genuine beer isn't.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Okay. I remember everything that you just said.
Okay.
And then piggybacking off of that,
springboarding.
using that as a jumping off. Okay, look, it's been a long time. I do remember that ale houses are where like people started going to talk about like their little whisper secrets about like their discontent with the government. I also remember that women were the original people making beer. As per usual, we had to come along and make things great.
Yeah, they were going hard. That actually is something that I learned as a major takeaway from the vid as well. I thought about it as you were talking.
Yeah.
I'm like, I remember they were saying those women ran the ale houses.
Pussy power.
Don't be gross about it.
From the loins.
Yeah.
From the loins of medieval maidens burst forth.
So lumpy.
Oh God, okay. You know, extra history might be watching this, so I would just like to apologize.
Let's take a and scene. And that was the joke. If we tried to ruin an extra history video, let's get into this family-friendly content for the babies.
Paris, 1876. Louis Pasteur is one of the greatest scientific minds in Europe, and he's turned his attention toward two things: beer and vengeance. 16 years earlier, he'd unlocked a millennia-old secret by proving that yeast, in the absence of oxygen, is what ferments sugar into alcohol. And then he thought he was done with beer until the war. The Franco-Prussian War, where France lost its hops-growing region of Alsace-Lorraine. For French pride, for French beer, he must again delve into the secrets of brewing in order to create what he calls a beer of national revenge.
Okay.
What he discovers this time are these specific microorganisms that make beer spoil or go sour. And he finds that bringing it to near boiling, pasteurizing it like with milk, will kill these organisms and increase the beer's stability and shelf life. Though this discovery will not remain French, it will inaugurate a new era, the age of scientific beer.
I learned about Louis Pasteur during my, whole Christian homeschooling thing.
Yeah.
But like because it was Christian homeschooling, they didn't talk about the beer.
Really?
They only talked about the milk.
Very interesting.
So for my whole life, I've associated Louis Pasteur with milk.
Right.
But apparently he was a beer man.
He's a beer guy. The beer of revenge.
When we left off, beer was going global, and industrialization was about to turn regional breweries into the massive beverage corporations we know today.
Budweiser.
Troops in British India, previously sickened in large numbers by local drinks, were now sipping on IPAs brewed in the UK. Viennese-style Pilsner was being produced in Mexico, and the twin forces of trade and colonialism were bringing European beer to foreign shores and founding some of the largest breweries of the modern era. In 1869, a Norwegian-American opened a brewery in Yokohama, which would eventually become Kirin. 7 years later, the Meiji government founded Sapporo Brewery, and what would become Asahi followed in 1889. China had an active beer brewing culture for thousands of years, but when grains like millet fell out of the diet, brewing shifted to rice. Yet as European powers carved out pieces of the Qing dynasty in the 19th century, foreigners began re-establishing Chinese beer. Poles, Germans, and Czechs started breweries in Haben, but it was in one particular city that a joint English-German concern found success: when it founded a brewery in Qingdao in 1903.
Oh.
Today, China is the world's largest beer consumer, and
Really?
Qingdao is the second most popular brew in China, surpassed only by Snow Beer, which traces its origins to a brewery established by Kirin in 1936 in
Okay.
what was then Japan's Manchurian puppet state. But things were brewing back in Europe too, specifically Northern Europe. In 1847, a young Danish man named J.C. Jacobsen founded a brewery outside Copenhagen, using steam power
Copenhagen.
and other new industrial technologies to produce Danish Pilsner. With his eye on the future, he named it after his 5-year-old son Carl. Thus, Carlsberg was born.
Oh, I was like, Carl. Carlsberg makes sense, but I was like, I wouldn't want to drink a Carl.
You want to get a Carl with me?
Hey, let's go grab a Carl.
Get like a cold Carl.
Sorry, Carl. Your name is fine.
17 years later, it gained some competition when a 22-year-old bought an outdated 16th century brewery
Sam
in
Adams.
Amsterdam. Determined to
Amstel
modernize
Light.
it, he hired a student of Louis Pasteur to find and culture new types of bottom fermenting yeast, and he christened both the brewery and his beer with his own name, Heineken.
Oh!
Together, these
Heineken.
rivals kickstarted the scientific age of brewing. Both Carlsberg and
Nice.
Heineken approached beer like a research project,
Right.
establishing in-house
Nerds.
laboratories where scientists experimented with new techniques, equipment, and ingredients. Beer got clearer and more carbonated.
Right.
Meanwhile, the area that would become Germany was going through its own seismic shift that would have major echoes far across the Atlantic in America. Now, we know we haven't talked much about the United States in this series.
Right.
Partially, it's because for thousands of years it didn't exist. Amazing, I know. But it's also because, well, American beer was just sort of fine.
Yeah.
Sure, it was always there, and often affecting history. For example, the Mayflower landed at Plymouth Rock because it ran out of beer and taxed.
What?
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 Wait, you can't. You can't,
No.
You can't just drop that little nugget.
We're gonna hit Google for that one at the end.
What?
Remember that. We're gonna Google that at the end.
But America's drink was whiskey, which was made easily from barley and corn,
Got it.
lasted longer, was easier to transport, and had a higher exchange value with the young country's largest trade partner, Native American tribes. In fact, colonial Americans drank only a third of the beer modern Americans do, and much
Whoa.
less than their British cousins at the time. In
Right.
fact, as an apprentice in London, Benjamin Franklin was scandalized by how much his British colleagues consumed. Until the 1840s, most U.S. beer was produced in the Northeast and consisted of English-style ales and porters.
Okay.
Yet America's laissez-faire economic freedom did make for mediocre brew. While most European countries had high standards for licensing breweries and quality control legislation, none of that existed in the United States.
Right.
Beer
Anybody
was a
could make
product,
it.
not an art. But a revolution was coming. Specifically, the revolutions of 1848.
The Revolution.
A largely failed series of liberal uprisings which convinced a whole generation of young, largely middle-class Germans to immigrate to the United States and
Okay.
take their brewing knowledge with them. But when they
Interesting.
arrived, they found the older German communities on the East Coast too crowded, especially for brewing. So instead, they struck out for the newly founded cities in the Midwest,
Oh, like
where the land was
Chicago.
literally free, cereals and hops grew
like
easily,
actually
and the
free.
cold winters meant ice for lagering beer was abundant. There, they founded large and expanding lager breweries and brought the German drinking culture of beer gardens with
Yeah.
their friendly, visible, and community-oriented
Beer gardens are
intoxication
so fun.
to America. In 1855, Swabian immigrant Friedrich Müller arrived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and
He
purchased
nailed
an existing brewery to modernize, christening it with his Americanized name.
Miller.
The next year, Joseph Schlitz arrived in the city and married a brewer's widow, taking over the business and naming
Ooh,
it after
wow,
himself.
scandalous.
But then when the Great Fire of 1871 destroyed Chicago, torching most of the rival breweries, he donated beer to get the city through, earning
Aw.
his brew the nickname, the beer that made Milwaukee famous.
Okay.
And then there was Frederick
Pops.
Pabst, who took ownership of his father-in-law's brewery and decided, as a branding exercise, to tie a blue ribbon around the bottles of the beer he'd
Yeah.
named for his father-in-law.
Pops Blue Ribbon. My first exposure to Pops Blue Ribbon was a surf song because my dad used to listen to surf music all the time.
Oh, is that what that is? I was like, I've never seen that commercial.
No, there was a thing called Pops Blue. Okay, anyway.
Right? Okay. Using the
And then I
whammy
found-
bar.
And then I found out that Pops Blue Ribbon is like one of the cheapest fucking beers. I thought Pops was
Primo.
like
Primo.
top, like
yeah,
top, bro.
shelf. Yeah, top shelf primo beer.
That's right. Best beer with a blue ribbon around it. And though Pabst Blue Ribbon had never actually won any awards, well, he just never corrected anyone
Marketing,
who assumed
bro.
it had. Miller, Schlitz, and Pabst, collectively known as the beer barons, became hugely wealthy, building enormous mansions and funneling their money into everything from resorts to some of the country's first amusement parks.
Wow.
But while they competed, they also banded together. During the Civil War,
As rich
when
people
Lincoln
do.
rolled out new taxes to pay for the conflict, they convinced him that clean, well-made, and healthy German lager should pay only 60% of the taxes that other beers did,
How?
giving them a major competitive advantage.
Okay.
But even so, all of them were about to be usurped. Adolphus Busch exited the Civil War both as a corporal in the Union Army and newly married to the daughter of St. Louis-based brewery owner Eberhard Anheuser. During the war, where 200,000 Germans served in the U.S. Army, he must have observed the popularity of lager beer amongst the ranks.
Okay.
When he bought his way into the Anheuser-Busch brewery, he used every modern technology he could find, from refrigeration to break reliance on winter ice and produce Pilsner year-round, to pasteurization that killed the microbes in beer, to industrial bottling machines, to refrigerated rail cars that shipped his product countrywide.
Cold.
Nice.
He also pioneered branding and marketing, sending branded art and goods like ashtrays to bars, and convincing them to stock
Smart.
only his signature beer. A beer inspired by the brews from the Czech town of
Budweiser.
Budweiser, or as we of course know it, Budweiser.
Wow.
By 1900, Busch
What a
was the
snake.
king of beers in the Midwest.
Yeah. What a freaking snake. Pause it real quick. What a freaking snake Budweiser
He
was.
wasn't a snake. He was smart. He was brilliant.
You know, we
he
have
was a pioneer
we have
of
an
this industry.
obsession in America about, popularizing these weasels. But what a douchebag.
What did he do wrong? He didn't even do anything wrong.
Debase the whole community. I can't believe it. All
All
those
he
guys
did-
making so much
All
progress.
he did was modernize the industry, and he forced everybody else to step up.
If he wanted me to like him, he shouldn't have put a crown on him and gave him a scepter. I hate crowns and scepters. I'm American. Take that off.
What does that guy say in Tekken? I hate rich people.
And America usurped Germany as the largest beer producer
Very
in
cool.
the world.
What a very cool
Anheuser-Busch
story.
was well on its way to becoming the planet's largest brewing company. Yet trouble was coming. See, for decades, concerns had been rising about America's drinking problem.
Yeah.
And beer, which often flew under the radar, landed in the crosshairs.
Yep.
Because the largely white, Protestant, long-established families, who tended to favor temperance, often didn't like what they thought of as immigrant
Yeah,
drinks.
right.
The Irish with their
I'm
whiskey,
glad he brought it up.
Italians with their wine. And especially after World War I, these German tycoons showing off their wealth gained from an empire of drunkenness. And that wave of anti-immigrant panic helped sweep Prohibition into law in 1920.
Back in the day, right now we use the term like white and black very broadly. But in the 1800s, they did not
Right.
at all.
Right.
There were very regional names for
Absolutely.
people. It was like your culture, your religion, your location. Even some people in north and southern places didn't really like each other that much.
Yeah.
It was very much that way. So when they said immigrant, they meant it.
Yeah.
All places not America.
Yep.
Ironically, though, Prohibition ultimately proved good for the big
It did.
brewers.
Yep.
See, they weathered the storm by producing soft drinks, while smaller brewers perished. And by killing the competition, it left
That's
the
it.
macro breweries in a position of dominance that's only changed in the last few decades. And that's how we got to the world we know today.
Also
okay.
led to the mob.
Yeah, in Vegas, a lot of our biggest customers came from wanting to kill people and drink about it.
Yep.
Yep, speakeasies.
How beer went from something made in Neolithic baskets to a massive product shipped and consumed around the world. But before last call, let's have one final toast across time.
Okay.
Come on, everybody in the past and present. Whether you're a beer baron, peasant alewife, Sumerian Ninkasi worshiper, colonial Minuteman, Inca emperor, Apache warrior, German monk, pyramid builder, or scientist, let's all raise a glass. Here's to the drink that lubricated the gears of human history. Beer!
Beer.
Cheers, everyone.
Clink.
So you're a beer drinker now.
Yeah, so I like low alcoholic party drinks.
Yeah.
And it turns out beer is that.
Yes.
I never knew my whole life.
I don't like beer,
Uh-huh.
but beer is cheaper than cocktails. So I will
Oh.
drink beer.
So no, my wife does not like beer. She likes micheladas. And the problem with micheladas is they're just expensive beers.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're the same price as the cocktails that I'm trying my best not to waste money on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I don't like beer, but I can appreciate that there are different tastes of beer because there are some beers that are more disgusting than others.
There have all these, but there's the duck one. The duck brewery is my favorite one. They have like the atomic duck. and the Psychedelic Duck, and they're all just different types of beers.
Yeah.
That they're just trying to, get their little name out.
I like sours and ciders, and sometimes I like a good ghost, not goose, ghost.
And they're all brewed in the same area that beer is produced. We was talking about how they did soft drinks and ciders and all that come from the same place.
Yeah, they're all beers, but they're just not gross.
Beery beers, hoppy beers.
Anyways, thank you guys so much for taking this journey with us. I know it took us a while, but I told you guys, I got you. And I said, if I had to drag him here dead, that it would happen. And look, he's very much alive.
We could get a comment, actually, from some people that were here from the beginning. That would be great to see. I would love to see if anybody has ran this race with us, or if it's just been different sets of people for every single bit.
I graduated high school in the time we finished this series.
Somebody had a baby in that year time, and I would like to know their name.
Don't forget to leave your reaction requests and recommendations down in the comments below. Other than that, peace out, hope biscuits. It's Skittin' Lit.